Broadcasting from the Cass Corridor in Detroit, it's the Metro, WDET's daily news and culture show. I'm Robin Vincent.
And I'm Kerry Jr. II, filling in for Tia Graham.
Today on the program, and I'm Kerry Jr. II, filling in for Tia Graham. Today on the program, we don't have to tell you that Detroit is full of cultural riches.
From Motown to techno, from street art to the Detroit JIT, the city has no shortage of shiny cultural exports.
But a lot of folks in the rest of the country still have a negative view of our city, or no view at all.
Why is that? And what should the city do to position Detroit more squarely on the cultural map?
We'll talk to some of the city's cultural pioneers and commentators about what should be done, and we'll take your calls.
This and a lot more is coming up, but first.
Artists and creatives are the crafters of culture, but they are also curators who capture what it feels like to experience a place and its people for those who cannot experience it. It's a cultural and crucial as often as an underappreciated role in society. And for Detroit, its creatives have remained an integral part of what makes this city flourish. Through all the hard times, no matter the circumstances, artists and creatives persist, crafting and curating the city's culture. How do we as citizens continue to support that work? Maybe it's paying cash for the artwork you double tap on when you're scrolling on your social media apps. There are plenty of potential answers to that question, but our next guest developed his own plan to support the artists in this area. To collaborate. Justice Oshioyi founded Detroit Magazine. That's D-U-H, Detroit Magazine. He and his team of creatives started the magazine last year to provide an avenue to express his creativity and support the work of other artists across the region. He joins us now to discuss the work and some of the reasons he decided to create this project. Justice, welcome to the Metro.
Hello. Yeah, thank you for having me. It's a great opportunity.
Yeah, thanks for being here. So to start off, your magazine, Detroit Magazine, what is it? Describe it to us.
Yeah, so it's an expression of creative freedom, and it's an expression of the creative diversity that we have in the city of Detroit.
And go ahead. Yeah.
It's a reversion back to analog, a way of consuming media that's normally online, but now it's in a way that you can have in your home, that someone can have physically, that can leave a legacy for people behind them and people who may not know them or may not be on Instagram or may not stumble upon it naturally through an algorithm.
Why the step back to analog?
One, because it's cool, and two, because when you look at the history of civilization, the things that last are physical items. Okay. Whether it's a physical item like pottery or writing or a book. A book is something that can be connected to an institution such as the Detroit Public Library, and it's something that you put on a shelf and in 50, 60, 70 years, your grandkids will see. And it'll represent a small point in time where someone or a group of people came together to create something for a specific purpose.
Now, the title of the magazine, D-U-H, Detroit, like phonetically spelled, why that title?
That's a wonderful question. And it's one I've heard a lot. Because once again, you'll see that I say, because it's dope. It's there are a couple ways to say Detroit. Detroit, 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 I say Detroit, and I want everyone else to say it that way. There isn't really that much to it other than that. It's just a cool little Easter egg.
It does force you to have to say it that way. You can't read it any other way.
Exactly.
That's fair. So the magazine itself is its own hard copy thing, right? It's a booklet, a magazine. But you've also said that Detroit Magazine is much more than that. Can you kind of describe what that is and what that looks like and what else you do?
Yeah, exactly. That is a wonderful question. Detroit I'm phrasing it as a creative movement, not just a magazine. And it's expressed through different initiatives such as a magazine or such as a gallery or a meet and greet or a merch deal or things like that. It's a creative movement that's focused on being highly intentional about showcasing the quality of creatives that we have in the city. As you mentioned earlier in your intro, a lot of people don't know Detroit, or they have a certain very specific narrow opinion of Detroit. And this is an opportunity to create a piece of media, a piece of legacy, and a piece of something that has grandeur to it, that tells people this was made by people who are Detroit or Detroit adjacent, that represents parts of Detroit or some voices of Detroit, and something that can be shown to the outer world with, a professional level of execution.
Now, you all, there's a booklet, there's the initiative that you're talking about here, but you all also host gallery openings across the city. Tell us a little bit about what that is like. What will someone who attends your event experience?
The experience is for communion. It's for coalescence of creatives. It's for networking. And this project as a whole is really a testament to what happens when you bring a ton of people together, a ton of creatives in the same city, but they all each have their same story and same background, and then put them in a room to collaborate, and meet and greet. Detroit in a lot of ways can be very siloed. And the point of this is to take all those silos and just mash them up in one room and say, hey, you guys talk to each other and let's figure out what we can do to make something great.
It sounds like you're describing like a networking event. Is there anything else there? Is it, are there images or photos? When I think of galleries, I think of an art gallery, right? But it sounds like you're describing a networking event. Is that the proper way to characterize it?
No, it's both. So Detroit, whether it's the magazine or the gallery, it's a reason for people to gather.
I see.
Reasons for people to gather can be Thanksgiving or a holiday or a death of a loved one or the celebration of a graduation. In this case, I'm forcing people to come together through the art of other artists. And so that's just a conduit to make people gather.
Now, I've seen some of the work you all have in the magazine specifically, and a lot of photos, beautiful scenes from the city, from streetscapes to some of the nightlife here in the city of Detroit. Is the magazine and the art medium that you all primarily are uplifting, is it photo dominant, or are you trying to expand to other
That's a very good
forms?
question. So there are plans to expand. We start off with the photography because, that's what's local and that's what's relevant. I'm a photographer by fun, by hobby. And, when you want to do something, you don't want to come in and, I don't want to say gentrify, or culture vulture or steal what's not yours. You want to do something that you can speak to. And what I can speak to is photography. I've studied it for years and I've done a lot with it. And, I'm not even Detroit based. I live in Southfield. And so when I come in, it's what can I do that I can be authentic with? And that's photography. Now, in future editions, if we have them, it may go into mixed media where we bring in other curators to help identify, strong people in those areas.
This is the Metro on WDET. I'm Kerry Jr. II in for Tia Graham. And we're speaking with Justice Oshioyi. He's the founder of Detroit Magazine. And Justice, you were just talking about something I want to speak to. You said you're from Southfield. You don't want to culture vulture or gentrify. When people see the title of that magazine, Detroit, they're going to have preconceived notions of what they expect that stuff in the magazine to represent. What do you think in terms of, like, they'll say, oh, he's from Southfield. Why isn't it called Southfield or Metro Detroit Magazine or some other area around the area of the of what your perspective represents? For you in that work, how do you own that responsibility?
That's a very good question, and it's a question that I think no one should avoid. And I think everyone who has that opinion is right to have that opinion. How can you have a home and then someone who doesn't live there starts to speak about if the floors are dirty, if they're clean? But the reality is, when I started this, I did not intend for it to grow this big. And, I thought it was a cool project. I thought maybe 30 people would see it.
It's like a fun hobby.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I had a vision, but nobody envisioned something like this. And so, it happened by chance. And, when things happen by chance, you end up taking responsibility for things that happen. And so I realized, and I've talked with many people from different places, and what I've realized is that, by adopting the name Detroit, I do speak on behalf of Detroit in some way or purport to know about Detroit in a lot of ways that I may not have that experience. And so now that I have this platform, I have the ability to take in that feedback and gather a diverse resource group of people who can help inform decision-making and support some of the things that we may be missing. So, for example, in the magazine, we have an incredible curation by, our curator's name is Javi. It's an incredible, diverse curation of people who are highly skilled, very authentic, very, very committed to what they do. There are some people who look at the magazine and say, you know what, this is not my version of Detroit. And I believe them when they say that. And that's something that's very important to me that I think that we will need to look for in the future, which is if there are many versions of Detroit, whether you're Polish or Irish or black, white, Jewish, Palestinian, if you're a transplant or born here, we will need to take that into account.
So what you just said there is an interesting point, because it's really well known that when it comes to where you live in the Metro Detroit area, it can create some tension, right? People always want to acknowledge that. And you talked about earlier the team that you have, the diverse team that you work with. How do you select the folks or the artists that you use in these projects, or what's the kind of thought process and what type of artists, where they're from, and how they're going to, and their vision is going to play into what this Detroit magazine is supposed to be?
Yes, absolutely. So I'll speak on behalf of the version that we've already created, Detroit by Creatives. And, it's by creatives because it's made by creatives. Everyone on the team is a creative. And it's showcasing Detroit from the perspective of the creatives in the magazine. So the people that we have, they're selected on a various scale of criteria, such as, one, are they active on social media? Mm-hmm. Do they have their photos online? Do they have a clear style, or are they just posting a bunch of random pictures that are not clear? You need to be able to see their photo and say, oh, that is Ryan's photo. Mm-hmm. That's Juliana's photo. But at the same time, they also need to show clear passion for what they do, because the whole point of this is to elevate creatives in many different facets. And so we want to give that opportunity to someone who's clearly doing it because they love it, not just because they want likes, not just because they're kind of have one toe in there. These are people who have, put both feet in, are doing it wonderfully, who are doing it well. And in a lot of ways, they act as role models for a lot of people that have looked at it. And even for myself, when I was a budding photographer, and I'm still a budding photographer, some of the people who are in, I looked up to and I studied their work before I ever met them.
There are a lot of creatives in the city of Detroit, I'm sure you know, and they've been doing work for a long time. I'm just curious to know, what about your work do you think stands out that will say, okay, this is where the Detroit creative scene should coalesce around?
You mean the magazine Detroit or my personal work?
Well, no, the magazine Detroit and the project and the overall mission and vision.
Absolutely. That's a good question as well. It's about intention and execution. That's what we add to the mix. There are a lot of initiatives in Detroit, which is a huge strength of the city. There's so many people who are starting their own thing and trying. But what separates Detroit and where we got this far in the last 8 months is the level of intention towards how we do things, what we do, who we pick, how we work with people, how we execute, how we plan, and how we make sure that things come together. What success is not always defined by what you accomplish, but it can be defined as the obstacles that you overcome. So when we started this magazine, most of us had never produced any book. I've never done a gallery before, but I opened up 5 in the last month. So, in short, this is really about saying I want to do something. I don't know how, but it's going to get done by this date. And then whatever needs to happen for that to be done gets done.
If you had described yourself at the beginning of this conversation as a creative, I would have thought you were a project manager. You are about getting it done, which is fascinating. One other question I'm curious about is the themes that you're looking for that create the Detroit magazine. What types of stories are you trying to tell?
That's a very good question as well. This magazine that we have now is very reminiscent of downtown Detroit. And so that the theme that we were really trying to portray is, let's say you're in Texas, or like, for example, I'm going to be sending out the book to someone in Japan tomorrow. Wow. It's going to New York and it's going to Europe as well. These are people who, in a lot of ways, have only seen what's commonly portrayed about the city. But the theme that we're portraying when you look at the book is these are wonderful photos. Most people have never seen a photo like that of Detroit. Mm-hmm. And with the method and with the scale of our execution and marketing and what we're doing, the goal is to modify or change or adapt their view of the city of Detroit by saying, this is something you've never seen, and it's incredible. And now you need to re-identify how you feel about the city.
I want to get into that a little bit more from your perspective. What for you is, how do you see the city of Detroit, and how do you want other people to see it a little bit more?
Yeah, good as well. And I'll go back and roll back just a half second just to say, I'm not from Detroit, and I've never claimed to be from Detroit. And this is not a magazine by someone from Detroit. Mm-hmm. This is a magazine by someone in a team of Detroit appreciators. And so in a lot of ways, this first edition showcases my view of Detroit. And, when you're a photographer, you walk around the city, usually you're downtown because the other areas you're not that comfortable yet. And it takes a while to get used to it and make those connections. And so what you'll see in the magazine is a lot of these, popular photo areas. You'll see a lot of diversity in style. Every photographer was selected because they had a unique lane in their style. We have someone who does Vivian Maier New York style street photography. We have someone who does incredible architecture and aerial photography, portrait, urban landscape that's almost dreamlike. We have someone who does very surreal like photography that it doesn't even look like it's, made in real life. So we wanted to showcase the diversity of the visions of the people who see the same area. If someone sees the same apple, who's drawing it,
My last question for you is, do you plan on reaching out or collaborating with more Detroit creatives? Because when people hear what you said, Detroit appreciators, and be like, wait a minute, a Detroit appreciator with a magazine called Detroit? Like, how is that in alignment, right? I guess I'm just wondering, like, what's your plan on collaborating intentionally with more Detroit artists and creatives to create this magazine going forward?
Yeah, very good question as well. And I'll drop back a half second as well to also say, there's nothing wrong with being an appreciator and lending your skills. Mm-hmm. You said something about me being a project manager. I have 5 certifications in project management. I do project management professionally in a lot of ways. And, I think the last thing any group or city would want to do is to push away talent that says, I want to bring my talent to help elevate what you're doing. I personally don't think that's right. But I've come here and I have these skills that are professional grade, and I'm offering them for free.
Justice Oshioyi is the founder of Detroit Magazine. Justice, thank you for joining us here on the Metro. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
From the WDET newsroom, Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan says the city is on track to have more than 100 high-speed charging stations for electric vehicles by the end of next year. The Biden administration is giving the city and the Southeast Michigan Council of Governments over $15 million to install EV chargers in Detroit and its suburbs. Now that's on top of the $23 million the city got from the American Rescue Plan Act to support EV production and infrastructure.
Coming up at 11, what is Detroit known for? Motown, cars, the Lions? Some people believe that the city should be promoting itself better. Coming up at 11, we want to hear from you. If you could make a new slogan for Detroit, what would it be? We'll take your calls. The number is 313-577-1019.
And coming up next, we'll talk about local reactions to the Israeli-Hamas ceasefire agreement with Dearborn activist and comedian Amr Zahar. We'll be right back on the Metro. Stay with us.
Welcome back to the Metro on WDET. I'm Kerry Jr. II in for Tia Graham.
And I'm Robin Vincent. After hundreds of days of brutal violence, Israel agreed to a ceasefire and hostage deal with Hamas yesterday. The Israeli war in Gaza began in October 2023 after a surprise attack by Hamas that killed roughly 1,200 Israelis and took hundreds hostage. Israel's response was a siege on Gaza that the United Nations and human rights organizations have described as a genocide. Over 46,000 Palestinians have been killed, and most of Gaza's remaining population is displaced. The damage is vast and untold. Israeli airstrikes have decimated tens of thousands of homes in Gaza. The ceasefire deal will allow Palestinians to return to whatever is left of those homes, but with most hospitals destroyed and infrastructure obliterated, Gaza is an unsafe place to be. Amr Zahar has been speaking out for months about the suffering of Palestinians in Gaza and the need for a ceasefire. Zahar is a Palestinian American based in Dearborn. He's an attorney, a professor, an activist, and a comedian. Amr, thanks for joining the Metro.
Thanks for having me.
Tell me first what went through your mind when you got the news of the Israeli-Hamas ceasefire.
So I just returned from Palestine about 4 days ago. I was there right after the holidays, and The people are tired. I was in Ramallah in Jerusalem, and people are ready to get back to normal life. And that includes all Palestinians everywhere around the world, right? We've been living with this trauma for 15 months now. And so people are ready to get back to rebuild and to normal life. This has been a genocide. This has been something where we're seeing our families torn apart live on the internet and live on air. And so people, of course, are happy. Of course, we're hearing the news this morning where the Israelis are now saying they might back out. There's all kinds of internal things going on in their cabinet. I mean, one of their ministers boasted about stopping a ceasefire deal for months, and looks like now he's trying to do it again. We need to breathe. We need this to be over so that we can get back to the work of rebuilding our land, get back to the work of fixing everything that's going on inside of ourselves. This has been unthinkable for 15 months now, and it needs to stop.
Could you talk about being in Palestine a little bit more and tell me about some of the people that you spoke with and more about the things that you saw and that you heard?
So I was in Ramallah for about 10 days from right before New Year's until about 5 days ago. And I spoke to everybody, whether they were students or activists, entrepreneurs, business people, and it's all about they need to get back to their regular life, right? We've all been consumed by this. And that includes all aspects of Palestinian society. You have tens of thousands of Palestinian laborers who have not been able to work in the last 15 months. You have the internal Palestinian economy has been hurt by this. The Israeli economy has been devastated even more. And so this all needs to come to an end. That was the general consensus. The other general consensus of everyone was that I met was that they were very thankful of what we've been doing in America and of the students standing up and other people standing up to put a light on this. Look, the toothpaste is out of the tube, right? Everyone understands Israel for what it is now, a racist apartheid regime, and it has been for 75 years. And so that has become clear now. And while the protests might have dwindled off, the real protests happened in November, right? Gaza was the reason Biden dropped out of the race. Gaza was the reason Harris lost. And so now we're starting to think of it in those ways, and we'll understand that more as time goes on. But Palestinians in Palestine are very obviously dealing with a lot of trauma and sadness, but very optimistic about the future as they see, hopefully, that American society is waking up a little bit to what their government has been doing.
What has it been like for you as a Palestinian American to watch Palestinians document their suffering on social media, to see this shocking humanitarian crisis unfold in Gaza?
So for 3 years now, at every show I do or every event I do, I wear something with the word press on it. Since Shireen Abu Akleh was murdered by the Israeli forces in Jenin in 2022.
That's an Al Jazeera journalist, and there still has not been justice for Shireen Abu Akleh.
And there won't. Unfortunately, the American government stops it, refused an investigation, let the Israelis conduct their own investigation. I mean, this is like letting OJ conduct the investigation into the murder of Nicole Simpson, right? It's ridiculous. And so I've been wearing press T-shirts since then. And then, of course, when October 7th happened, now we know that even in the last few days it's happening, but over 200 identified journalists have been killed by the Israeli army in Gaza. And this has been a pattern that's been going on for a long time. I mean, it makes you wonder, why are they killing journalists, right? Of course, the Israelis tell you everyone is Hamas, including the doctor that they kidnapped from the hospital a couple weeks ago. I mean, it's just so crazy, right? I mean, this doctor, I guess, was some terrorist commander leader who willfully unarmed walked up to the Israeli tanks and surrendered himself and didn't do anything to them. I mean, it's like, must be the worst terrorist ever, right? So this is what they call all of us, and this is what they call all of the press people as well. And so I've been trying to stand up and bring awareness to that. And to me, as far as I'm concerned, we are people who are trying to tell our story. And there's only one reason that you try to silence the other side, and that's usually because you're lying or you need your narrative to get through without any combat. We don't try to shut them up. We actually like it when the other side talks, because eventually they tell on themselves. Racists eventually tell on themselves. So this mode of trying to silence us, it happens in everywhere. Whether it's me doing a show somewhere and pro-Israel people call up the venue to get me canceled, or whether it's intentionally murdering. It happened dozens of times at shows. Unfortunately, they've never succeeded, or maybe they've succeeded sometimes and I don't know. But dozens of times where I've done shows, whether it's been at Carnegie Hall, the Kennedy Center, venues here in Michigan, venues in Canada, we always get. I sometimes have to have sit-downs with the theater a couple weeks before our show, say, hey, we got all these complaints. Will you put out a statement saying that you're not anti-Semitic? I'm like, no, I'm not going to put out I'm not going to put out a statement saying that I'm not a racist. That's what racists do, Right. So I'm not going to do that. But this is the narrative that we have to live with every day, right? It's terribly dehumanizing, and it's the environment we've been living in for over a year now.
Why do you think being in support of Palestinian rights and sovereignty has to equate with being anti-Semitic?
Right. I mean, when you don't have an argument to make, right, when you can't argue on the facts, then you simply will jump to saying, well, you must hate us for who we are. And of course, this is ridiculous, right? First of all, there's thousands, maybe tens of thousands of Jews in America that joined the Palestinian fight for rights, Jewish Voice for Peace, So obviously we're not, they want to make us all out to be bloodthirsty anti-Semites. It's obviously not true. But this is what you do when you don't have a case to make, right? When you can't explain why you kicked out 1 million Palestinians in 1948 simply because they weren't Jewish. When you can't explain why there are Jewish-only settler roads in the West Bank, which is occupied territory. When you can't explain why an Israeli citizen can marry anyone from somewhere else in the world and bring them to Israel to live unless that someone else happens to be a Palestinian. When you can't explain these racist apartheid laws, you jump to these other things, right? Yelling and screaming and accusing the other side of anti-Semitism simply for being who they are. And of course, this is a ridiculous way to have a debate. We argue the facts. We argue the stories our grandparents told us. We argue what we see with our own eyes. And now the American public is seeing that as well.
This is the Metro on WDET. I'm Robin Vincent alongside Kerry Jr. II. We're speaking with Amr Zahar, a Palestinian-American attorney, activist, and comedian, about the new ceasefire deal between Israel and Hamas. I want to go back to the need for social media to see these unvarnished accounts of what's happening on the ground in Gaza. This has filled a void. And that's Western media's failure to fully report on what's happening. But this is nothing new. Over the years, a lot of prominent Western media outlets have failed to report on the Arab world accurately and with humanity and context. I took a journalism course at Wayne State University that focused on how the New York Times' inaccurate reporting on Iraq having weapons of mass destruction led to the American invasion of Iraq. But, Amr, I have seen some reporting, especially by Arab American journalists, that captures more context and humanity than we've seen in the past. Are things shifting at all? Have you been seeing this as well?
I think when October 7th happened, we saw the American public, because it was the event that it was, right? People asked questions. Like they would ask questions when Nat Turner did what he did, right? People ask questions. And we Palestinians have always said, please do your research, ask questions. When they asked questions, they found out that we were telling the truth. But more importantly, they found out that their government, their U.S. government, had been lying to them. And when you find out that you've been lied to for a long time, your first emotion is anger. And anger is what brought people into the streets with us. And that anger still exists. We saw it through the elections. We saw it through the Democratic National Convention and so on and so forth. And so that makes me very optimistic that people see now the truth. We know that we have the truth as Palestinians, and people start to see there's nothing more powerful than that. And that, I think, will have a very long-term effect that we don't understand yet. But we have been dehumanized in the media and dehumanized by the American government for years. I mean, I always say we Arabs have a special power, right? We can be in a news story even when a news story has nothing to do with us. So like when Russia invaded Ukraine, within a week, you had news reporters getting on and saying, wow, we don't know what to do. There's all these blonde-haired, blue-eyed people getting attacked. And then another reporter got on and said, well, this is crazy that this is happening because this is a civilized place, unlike Iraq or Afghanistan.
This isn't Iraq, yes, okay? I remember that.
And we had nothing to do with this war, right? And all of a sudden we become the story because I guess, I don't know, American public and American media is so used to bombing and killing Arabs that when it's not Arabs, they somehow have to compare it to that to measure their emotions about it. I mean, it's ridiculous. And we live with that. And we live with being dehumanized all the time, to the point where a few days after October 7th, Joe Biden came out and said that he saw beheaded babies when he didn't. And the media ran with it.
That was a lie. That's right.
And 4 days later, a 6-year-old boy in Chicago was stabbed 26 times by his neighbor to death, his neighbor said, Palestinians don't deserve to live. And so this is the world that we've lived in from before October 7th, but especially now, continuous dehumanization. And so we have tried to fight back against that. And yes, that means sometimes yelling and screaming and saying that we deserve to live. But this is what we have to do. And hopefully now people are understanding that more.
Do you think something like the uncommitted movement has played a role in people's understanding? It certainly played a role in the behavior of voters this presidential election. Did it send an effective message, would you say, to leaders at the top here, to people like President Biden and Vice President Harris and to President-elect Trump, that the Arab voter has power?
Well, I think that we had a historic opportunity in front of us and we took advantage of it. And the historic opportunity was to be the reason that an incumbent party loses the White House. An incumbent party that we were a part of loses the White House. In 2020, 80% of Arab Americans in Dearborn voted for Joe Biden. In 2024, 35% of Arab Americans in Dearborn voted for Kamala Harris. Think about that. Think about Trump beating Harris in Dearborn. Think about that. Think about the guy who said he wants to do the Muslim ban and Islam hates us, all of a sudden getting more votes than Kamala Harris. And that's an atmosphere that the Democrats created. Think of a scenario where in Dearborn there were thousands, maybe tens of thousands of voters who walked into the voting booth and voted for Rashida for Congress and Trump for president. And you might ask yourself, how the heck does that happen? Well, a genocide is how that happens. A Democratic-backed genocide. We rejected the party at the top. By the way, other Democrats won in Dearborn on Election Day. Kamala Harris is the only one who lost. Our votes were passionate, they were educated, and they were targeted to the candidate and the office that we saw as being most responsible for our genocide. And so I think the Democratic Party doesn't seem to have woken up to it yet. They don't seem to be talking about it in those terms yet. But they better wake up pretty soon, because unless they come and have real dialogue with us and say, how do we make sure this doesn't happen again? What policies do we need to implement to make sure this doesn't happen again? It will happen again. And it's not because we like Trump. We understand who Trump is, okay? And we understand we dealt with him once for 4 years. We'll deal with him again if we have to. Well, obviously, we all have to. And we'll deal with him again. But the point is that we showed our power. The only way for us to show our power was to make sure that the Democrats were defeated at the top of the ticket. If we supported them, then we would not only be saying that genocide was not a red line for them, but that also genocide was not a red line for us. We would be saying that you can do anything to us and we'll still support you when it comes down to it. We could not take that stance morally, and we didn't, and we took advantage of the opportunity that we had.
Amr, you've talked a little bit about what you have heard from Palestinians in Palestine, where you just were. I wonder what you're hearing from Palestinian Americans in Dearborn right now, following this news of a ceasefire that people really have their fingers crossed will be enacted on Sunday.
Well, I mean, hopefully it still is enacted on Sunday. Hopefully the Israelis don't throw a wrench into it, but I don't trust that they won't. We'll see. But look, for Palestinian Americans and Arab American voters who voted for either Jill Stein or Donald Trump, this is seen as a victory, right? I mean, Trump clearly doesn't want to inherit this. He understands that it's a major political problem. He made some promises. Now, Trump is not that trustworthy, but he made some promises about how he's going to put an end to all of this. He doesn't want to inherit it. And that is a political situation. Again, we understand who Trump is, but that's a political situation that we tried to take advantage of. And so hopefully it comes through and it holds. People need to get back to their regular lives. Gaza is destroyed. Gaza is wiped off the face of the earth. I ask every American, as we look at these wildfires in California, imagine if somebody set those wildfires intentionally. And imagine when ambulances and other people tried to go and help the people in the wildfires, that somebody bombed them. And imagine that it was all funded by the American government. That's what we've been living with in Gaza for the last 15 months. People need to get back to their lives. They need to get back to the process of rebuilding, which could take years. And that's something we all need to be a part of.
That's what I want to talk to you about is how do you begin rebuilding an area of the world that is not only destroyed, covered in rubble, that is also under Israeli occupation and has been described as an open-air prison. What is next?
Hopefully the political realities change. Hopefully many, many countries get involved. But there's nothing that I have more faith in than the will and the spirit of the Palestinian Arab people to make sure that we rebuild our country. We've rebuilt it before, and we'll do it again. Gaza is going to be more beautiful than it ever was. And hopefully we as Americans can all one day go visit and enjoy not only a rebuilt Gaza, but the spirit of the people. We Palestinians are a resilient people. Being Palestinian is relentless. It comes for you every day. But we make sure that we always stay strong because we know we have the truth. And nothing is more important than that. Nothing can give you more strength. When you have the truth, you can do anything. You can smile. You can keep going on with life no matter what they're trying to do to you. And that's something that not only Palestinians Americans have experienced, but Black Americans have experienced, and Latino Americans have experienced, and Native Americans have experienced. You can always, always be proud of your culture when you know you have the truth. And that's something that no one can take away from us. And so I have deep faith in our people and deep faith also in the American public that they're understanding more what's going on. And so, yes, it'll be a long process, but we need this war to stop. Hopefully this political climate that we're in will make it stop, but we are going to rebuild. And Gaza is going to be more beautiful than it ever was, and the people will return, and we will make sure that our people are at the center of everything that's going on.
Amr, among the many different hats that you wear, you are a comedian in addition to being an attorney, an activist, several other different things. How are you taking some of these painful moments in time and turning them into comical fodder? What does that look like?
Well, I brought you a copy of my book. It's called Being Palestinian Makes Me Smile. Okay. And in the introduction of the book, I write that we've all seen people laugh until they cry. But sometimes you can see somebody cry until they laugh. So these emotions are connected somehow, all right? And we all know that some of the best comedy comes from tragedy, and comedy comes from sometimes pointing out the ridiculousness in life and poking fun at power. And so there is room for comedy. There is room for laughter as therapy in all of this. I cannot wait in the coming months to go to Gaza and do comedy even on top of the rubble for people there so that they can have some sort of relief. We need to all be part of the recovery that's going on in Gaza. And so comedy has its place. All art has its place. And so I look forward to that. I'm doing a comedy tour that was I doing before October 7th, but now I'm doing it after, and it's changed a little bit, called The Truth, because we Palestinians hold the truth. We come from a long line of people that are holding the truth, including a guy 2,000 years ago that was born in Palestine. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He was from Palestine, not from Texas, okay? He's one of us, all right? We know we have a long tradition of holding the truth and taking care of the truth. And so that is a tradition that we're going to uphold. And yes, there is room for art and comedy in that. And I look forward to sharing it with everybody.
Amr Zahar is a Palestinian American based in Dearborn. He's an attorney, a professor, an activist, a comedian, a book author. Amr, thanks for joining us on the Metro.
Thank you.
from the WDET newsroom. Detroit Mayor Mike Duggan says the city is on track to have more than 100 high-speed charging stations for electric vehicles by the end of next year. The Biden administration is giving the city and the Southeast Michigan electric vehicles by the end of the year, and the administration is giving Southeast Michigan Council of Governments over $15 million to install EV chargers in Detroit and its suburbs. That's on top of the $23 million the city got from the American Rescue Plan Act to support EV production and infrastructure.
Governor Gretchen Whitmer toured the Detroit Auto Show and addressed industry leaders about her plans for this year. The governor says she's ready to work with President-elect Donald Trump, as well as legislative Republicans who won control of the state house this year. Whitmer, a Democrat, says her budget plans will include a mix of new revenue, tax cuts, and proposed spending on roads and other infrastructure. She also says economic incentives will be necessary to compete with other states for manufacturer investment in Michigan.
Coming up at 11, what is Detroit known for? Motown, cars, the Lions? Some people believe that the city should be promoting itself better. So we want to hear from you. If you can make a new slogan for Detroit, what would it be? We'll take your calls. The number is 313-577-1019.
Up next, we'll learn about one of the celebrations honoring Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. right here on Wayne State's campus. We'll be right back on the Metro. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Metro on WDET, Detroit Public Radio. I'm Robin Vincent.
And I'm Kerry Jr. II in for Tia Graham. It's been 60 years since one of the most pivotal moments in civil rights history. Back in March 1965, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. led protesters on a 3-day, 54-mile march from Selma to Montgomery, Alabama. Marchers were met with violence by Alabama state troopers. The appalling scene was broadcast on live television on what now is called Bloody Sunday. Images of Alabama state troopers using whips, batons, and tear gas to beat back the peaceful protesters shocked Americans. It was a watershed moment that eventually led to the passage of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. That was 60 years ago. Since then, as years become decades, the struggle for equal rights and freedoms for all Americans has taken many turns. New people and new movements build on the ones that came before them.
That's right. New people and new movements continue. Monday is Martin Luther King Jr. Day, and an event tomorrow at Wayne State University will honor Dr. King's life and legacy. It's called 60 Years After Selma, and we're still marching. Here to tell us all about how Wayne State is celebrating Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s legacy is Stacy Clayton. She's the Director of Community Affairs at Wayne State University. Stacy, thanks for taking a few minutes to join us on the Metro.
Good morning, Robin. Good morning, Carrie. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
So this year marks the 60th anniversary of the Voting Rights March led by Dr. King. It's also the 25th anniversary of Wayne State's annual MLK tribute. So a quarter century into these celebrations here at Wayne State, what sets this year's program apart?
Well, I think the two things that you just named, one, it is our 25th anniversary of honoring Dr. King, and also it's an opportunity for us to look back at 1965 and do an evaluation of where we are today in 2025 regarding voting rights, regarding civil rights, regarding equity, regarding unity in our country.
Can you talk a little bit more about that evaluation, about the assessment of where we are at today? There have been so many strides that have been made, and yet also a lot of setbacks.
Right. That's one of the things that our keynote speaker, Reverend Dr. Frederick Douglass Haynes III, will be talking about. He'll be doing that analysis, looking at where things are in our country today. We have a new administration that's coming in, looking at where we hopefully will be going in the future. And again, it's about how we as people here in the United States, how we are able to look at areas of inequity and work together to create more unity and to make sure that everyone, no matter race, creed, color, sexual orientation, has the same equal rights across the board.
Now, MLK Day also happens to be Inauguration Day this year. Are you worried about the inauguration overshadowing or taking oxygen away from MLK Day?
No, I don't think so, because if you recall, when President Barack Obama was sworn in for his first term, that too actually happened on King Day. So I think there is enough hours in the day for people to, if they want to watch the inauguration, or there are also many in-person celebrations honoring Dr. King. And there's also our event, which even though it is tomorrow, the 17th, we are taping it so people will be able to watch our program as well on Monday, Dr. King Day, at wayne.edu/live, wayne.edu/live, and it'll be posted on our website at 10 a.m.
Okay, and we'll say that again for listeners here in a moment. Now, Stacey, when you put together an event that's honoring someone who has had such a pivotal impact on our country and the world, it seems like there's a lot of pressure to do it right, to do justice to Dr. King's legacy, his work. What does success look like for tomorrow's program?
Well, I think, first of all, success looks like that we are totally at capacity. We were at capacity for the Hillberry Gateway Theater 2 days in advance. But in addition to honoring Dr. King, as you said, this is the 25th anniversary, the Wayne State tribute to Dr. King started through the vision of Dr. Arthur L. Johnson, who was the first African-American vice president at Wayne State University. He also was a classmate of Dr. King's at Morehouse College. And so here at the university, he wanted to find a way to honor his classmate and also someone that he worked very closely with when Dr. Johnson was the president of the Detroit branch NAACP. And so success looks like people not only coming to our program tomorrow, honoring Dr. King, but also answering the call to action that Dr. Haynes will put forth again about working to make sure that Dr. King's dream remains alive in the words and the actions that we do every day.
This is the Metro on WDET. I'm Robin Vincent.
And I'm Kerry Jr. II in for Tia Graham. You're listening to the Metro. Ahead of MLK Day on Monday, we're talking about an event taking place at Wayne State that is honoring Dr. King's life and legacy. All right. So next question I have is about some of the other speakers. You mentioned earlier Reverend Dr. Frederick Douglass Haynes III, but there are some other speakers, too, who will be offering some reflections. Who else will be attending and who will we hear from?
Well, thank you so much for asking that question. I did mention Dr. Arthur L. Johnson. We have the Dr. Arthur L. Johnson Community Leadership Award, which we give out every year, and that is to honor someone who is continuing Dr. Johnson's vision for working in our Detroit community. We'll be recognizing posthumously Dr. William Picard, who is a businessman, entrepreneur, philanthropist, and educator. So his daughter Mary will be accepting the award on the family's behalf. We also will have here in person with us Senator Debbie Stabenow. She will receive the Warrior Strong Distinguished Service Award for her 50 years in public service, and that award is presented to someone who is coming to the end of their public service career. The first year we did that was in 2022 with Detroit City Council President Brenda Jones. The following year, Congresswoman Brenda Lawrence. Last year, we had Wayne State President Roy Wilson, and this year we'll be honoring Debbie Stabenow. And in addition to the speakers, of course, we're going to have some performances. We will have the Detroit Academy Arts and Sciences show choir. They will be doing a couple of numbers. The Detroit PAL cheer team will open up for us, and we are very, very excited because we will have several Wayne State students from our College of Fine Performing and Communication Arts doing performances. And I'm not going to spoil it. People have to watch it on Monday if they want to see it, but they're going to do a fabulous theatrical production as well as part of our program.
Well, Stacey, thank you so much for outlining all of the things that are going to be taking place during this tribute. We appreciate the time you've given us today. Stacey Clayton is the Director of Community Affairs at Wayne State University. Tomorrow, the university is presenting a tribute to celebrate the life and legacy of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. It's called 60 Years After Selma, and We're Still Marching. The event will be taped and broadcast online on MLK Day, which is Monday at 10 a.m. The link is wayne.edu/live. Stacey, thank you again for joining us on the Metro.
Thank you, Robin and Carrie, for the opportunity. Appreciate it very much.
Coming up at 11, what's Detroit known for? Motown? The Lions? Some people believe that the city should be promoting itself better. Coming up at 11, we want to ask you about this. If you could make a new slogan for Detroit, what would it be? We'll take your calls. The number is 313-577-1019. This is the Metro on WDET. Stay with us.
This is WDET FM, Detroit Public Radio, your connection to news, music, and conversation. Welcome back to the Metro on WDET. I'm Kerry Jr. II, in for Tia Graham.
And I'm Robin Vincent. When you think about the city of Detroit, what comes to mind? Is it our old factories that stretch across a vast landscape? Is it our music? The techno and hip-hop, gospel and jazz that's infected stereos from here to Berlin and far beyond? Or is it the culture of grit? This is a place where people stop at nothing to make something their own. Detroit is not just one thing. It's many. And it's changed a lot over the last few decades. Detroit is a place that has great parks, a beautiful riverfront, DJs that keep people dancing for hours into the morning, world-renowned museums that tell stories that are both joyous and tragic. But for so long, Detroit's narrative has been painted by people who've never been here, by people who don't actually know any Detroiters. And because of this, they've only considered Detroit from a really particular lens, a narrow framing that calls Detroiters violent, that claims residents are criminals, that the city is dead. But Detroit has never been dead. We know that. It's been built and maintained by innovators, those who are both kind and refuse to be walked on, by those who demand respect and offer generosity unseen in so many other places. This is a place that's constantly being reconstructed, first and foremost by those who never left.
So, if you were to market the city the way you wanted, what would you make it? What's your slogan for Detroit? Call in now and tell us. Call the number 313-577-1019. So in the studio with us, we have Ryan Patrick Hooper. He's host of In the Groove on WDET, which airs after this show from noon to 3. He says the city markets itself poorly, and he wrote about it in an Our Detroit magazine article. He has some ideas about how we could do better. He's here to discuss it now. Ryan, welcome to the Metro.
Thank you so much. Fire intro, by the way. That was great.
Sam Corey, producer
Shout out to
Sam Corey, on the pen there.
We're also joined in studio by Waajeed. He's a musician, a music producer, DJ, and the founder of the Underground Music Academy. He's also the host of The Boulevard on WDET. That show runs from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. on Wednesdays and midnight to 2 a.m. on Sundays. Waajeed, welcome to the Metro.
What up, though?
What up, though?
Yeah, and also, I agree. Wonderful intro.
Thank you. It's nice to have our two DJs from the station here talking Detroit culture. We appreciate it. I'm going to start with you, Ryan. So you think Detroit is doing a poor job of marketing itself. Why is that?
It was something that I noticed going to places like Austin, Texas, and going to Nashville, these cities that, one calls itself the live music capital of the world. Nashville is Music City. And it was hard for me to go to those places, being a Detroiter, being like, wait a minute, we're the greatest music city on the planet.
City.
Exactly.
1,000%.
But unfortunately, I think on so many different levels, from, City Hall to educating our own citizens, sometimes we don't even know what we make here, what is created here. It's not broadcast, except here on WDET, of course.
Well done.
I'm talking about
Love it.
everything from signage, letting me know this was a historic place where music was made here. I'm saying when you land at the airport, I want to see a 3-foot or a 3-story tall picture of the Supremes. I want to hear Motown music everywhere. And I want to have a phrase that can take this all in. I know here in Detroit we might say we're known as Motown around the world, but I don't actually think that sticks in the way we might think it does.
Yeah.
I see. And is this primarily music that you're talking about here?
I think it's arts and culture all over the place. I mean, to the point in that intro, you talked about people writing our narratives, saying things about the city. I think arts and culture is one of those ways to really start conversations with people who maybe they've made up their mind about something, but we can kind of open it up through arts and culture. And I really have to give credit to the painter Mario Moore, who said, the reason why people come here is arts and culture. That is the primary reason why people travel to Detroit. So I don't know why we're not having more conversations about cultural tourism financially, spiritually, in a lot of different ways.
There are a lot of folks, I feel like, who see all the arts and culture that go on in the city and are like, wow, this is fantastic. I never knew.
Exactly.
So I can see that. Waajeed, I want to bring you in the conversation quickly here. What's your take? Do you feel like Detroit needs to market itself a little bit more?
Absolutely. I feel like we're missing the mark. Ryan and I have actually spoken several times about the missed opportunity that Detroit is experiencing, because when we go out of state, out of country, they know who we are. They recognize our brilliance, and sometimes we can't see ourselves very clearly.
Do you feel like in conversations you've had with folks who are here that's what comes up? They say, I don't actually know much about the techno scene. Like, tell me a little bit about what that's like.
Absolutely. I mean, I built an academy based on the fact that most people don't know that most electronic music, in particular techno and house, especially techno, is born in the city.
Thanks, Gary. Waajeed, I wonder how much things have changed. I mean, when we think about, let's say, 10, 15, 20 years ago, so many of Detroit's luminary techno producers, DJs, they would have to go overseas to get the kind of recognition that they were fighting to get in Detroit. Do you feel, though, that there have been some strides, there have been some changes? What does it look like now versus 10, 15, 20 years ago?
Sure, we've made strides, but to be honest, it's not enough. There's not enough of a conversation that's happening between the creatives and the folks that are immediately connected to the arts and culture conversations with the folks that are downtown, that can provide a better opportunity for this to be known, not just amongst the world, but amongst us as Detroiters.
To that point, talking about techno being this Detroit product, there's cities overseas in Europe that say we're the techno capital. And the reason why they're able to say that with what they feel is legitimacy is because the mayor shows up to endorse that. And there's funding from the city into this to give it legitimacy.
Right.
We talked about Detroit's narrative. One of the biggest ways to make arts and culture a more serious conversation is to have a more serious endorsement from City Hall and a real plan of how do we make this a backbone of our economy, which it is. There's money that comes in from tourism. I'm not saying there's not, but I think there's a bigger picture and a more rounded out idea of how this can affect the city from education, like Waajeed is talking, letting people know, hey, we made this. We're special. This is incredible. Detroit makes it. The world takes it. We need to see that, and I think it does start at a political place. I think it starts at City Hall and more of a serious conversation of how do we support this? How do we grow it?
Set the stage, though, for us, little Ryan. How much money are we bringing in right now from cultural tourism? How much money do you think we could bring in or need to bring in to give the vision that you're trying to lay out here?
I mean, it's billions, right? It's, Visit Detroit, I think, puts the number maybe close to like 18 billion in a year of money that's coming into the city. It's a huge piece of it, but I do think that there's more out there and more investing that can be done. And again, I think it's in simple ways like signage and maps and visible things like that. I think it's also in investing in the musicians and the creators that are here. So we don't have to have that brain drain, where they have to go other places to be able to make a living. And if you look at the National Endowment of the Arts or anyone that's doing these studies on the impact, cultural tourists spend double as regular tourists. And when you invest in these things, people stay. That increases your tax base, all that type of stuff. It's a conversation of, do you respect the creative class? And can we have a serious conversation about what supporting a creative economy in Detroit looks like? I don't see it. I mean, there's some things that are happening, but it's scattered. Yeah. We're not working together.
It's not cohesive.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So we've been asking our listeners throughout the first hour now about what they think their slogan would be. Ryan, we know you have a slogan. You want to give it to us, or what you think the slogan for the city of Detroit
I do a
should
show
be?
called In the Groove, and there's been some issues with people where they think my slogan is self-serving to the show, and I'm just going to say that is not
pretty
true.
Close. It's pretty close to the title of the show.
Here's what I'm saying. I'm saying one city under a groove. And this comes from Funkadelic. It comes from a record that was actually recorded at United Sound, not far from these studios.
Preach.
And it came up because I was in Nashville at the African American Music Museum, and they had, One Nation Under a Groove. And that made me so upset that I was in Nashville and I was seeing this legendary Detroit record on their wall and they were using it. And One City Under a Groove brings together all the music, right? Yep. We can talk about techno, we can talk about that, but I'm talking about the black church. I'm talking about the jazz. I'm talking about the gospel. I'm talking about the indie rock, all that type of stuff. It's a way to kind of talk about it, put it under an umbrella without leaving anything out. One city under a groove.
Let's go to the phones and hear from a caller about what they think the slogan for Detroit should be. Kyle in Huntington Woods, thanks for calling the Metro.
Hi there. Yeah, thanks for having me on.
What's your slogan?
Okay, so my slogan is Detroit, where innovation meets flavor.
Okay.
Innovation meets labor.
Flavor.
Flavorful
innovation.
Oh, okay.
Okay, Kyle. I'm here for that.
We're all of that.
I like the nod to the food scene here. I've heard a lot about Detroit's food scene growing around, so I like that.
All right, we're going to do a little rapid fire thing here. Let's stay on the phones.
Yeah.
Sabrina Nelson, what's your slogan? Sabrina,
Hi,
are you there?
everyone.
Hi.
Oh, Sabrina.
Here.
Hey, Sabrina
What up,
Nelson.
Sabrina?
Hey, everybody. I love y'all. What up, though?
What up, dude?
My slogan would be heart, hands, head, or, work hard, play hard, create hard.
Love that.
Yep.
I like that.
We'll take that. We're adding that to the list.
And
Thanks
Sabrina
for
talks
calling.
the talks and walk the walk.
Right.
She's really
All
doing
day.
the work.
A legend.
One more. Dante in Detroit, thanks for calling the Metro. What is your slogan for our city?
Hi, shout out to Carrie, Ryan, and Waajeed. My slogan would be the Golden Rule City.
The
Yikes.
golden rule, as in
Love that.
do unto others as you would do to yourself.
Exactly.
Okay.
Ooh, love
Okay.
that.
How are the people?
That's
I like that
beautiful.
support. It
Yeah.
is beautiful.
Thank you for calling, Dante. Waajeed, can we turn things back to you? You have, again, seen a lot of changes in the city. You've been working really hard to remind people that Detroit is the birthplace of techno. You let us know that all the time on the Boulevard. You take us on this journey of musical education and discovery.
Yeah.
Talk to us about what you think needs to happen, how the city needs to be supporting the kind of work that you're doing and that others like you are doing right now.
Well, I think the work starts with people like us. People who are in positions to that have leadership and people that are being heard. I think for us to evangelize, like the rest of the world will follow. So I think that it starts here, especially at WDET. It's super important, the work that we're doing. And then ultimately, like, we need to be thinking about implementing laws or at least greater conversations downtown for folks to start spreading this gospel. It's important for us to not just have the idea, but to actually evangelize, to actually take it to the street. So I think those are two good starting points.
You're listening to The Metro on WDET. I'm Kerry Jr. II in for Tia Graham. I'm joined alongside Robin Vincent. Waajeed, I do want to ask you, because earlier you were talking about the conversations you were having with folks who don't really know about the culture that exists and that thrives in the city of Detroit. Can you just give me a little bit of an insight into what those conversations sound like? Who are you talking to? Who are the folks who are just
It starts from younger folks to older folks.
All
I'm normally having this conversation doing my Uber drives.
Okay. Like people, okay. Interesting.
And folks, like the idea of the conversation, or if I'm coming from the airport, they ask me where I'm coming from. I'll say I'm flying in from Ibiza or Japan or whatever. And they say, what do you do? And I say, I'm a DJ. And they say, like, what are you playing? Like, what makes you so special? And it's like, it's not me that's special. It's the city that I'm from and what we do and the institution that we have kind of given the world. And it normally starts there, but it's all different age groups, in terms of folks that just really generally have no clue that techno was just born here, but not even techno. We could start with Dilla. We could go on and on and on in terms of like the origins of innovation here in the city.
And when you invoke Jay Dilla, you don't necessarily hear people in other places making that connection with Detroit.
Correct. Yes, normally Los Angeles.
Yes.
And yeah, that's pretty unfortunate.
Is there a worry though? Do you think is it dangerous to market Detroit as techno city, or by leading with artists' work, if it means that those artists, are you worried that they might become exploited or commodified by doing that?
Yeah, but that's just part of it. We're in the business of exploitation. So that's just a natural part of the conversation of dealing with the music business. So it's a question of, are we exploiting the best out of ourselves, or are we allowing places like Berlin to exploit our natural product and become billionaires?
I think there's also always a question, though, whenever there's any type of dollars that come to the city of Detroit, whether you've exploited yourself to do it or not, everyone wants to know if that's actually going to go to the folks who have been through it all, right?
Exactly.
I just want to know from your perspective, kind of your vision for that. Like, could it be that this is something that we love and have here, and we know that the people here are going to benefit from what we created? Or are you saying it's worth the risk to go for it and try to market it, and hopefully we get what we want for the folks who've been here?
I always say take the risk. No risk, no gain. And no investment, no return. So I say go for it. I think it's important for us to at least try a different path, similar to what Ryan has been saying. Like we have to advocate for ourselves first.
There's always going to be that struggle too of, some of these things are underground, and that's the beauty of them. And they were only able to prosper and grow the way they did because it was something from the heart and something underground. That's a balance in every city constantly of how do these organic, altruistic, artistic things grow and become a financial spine for people to be able to make a living. And that's a tightrope, and you can get tripped up on that pretty easily. But you gotta, to Waajeed's point, you gotta make that attempt. And I just think you see a higher quality of life. You see just a lot of gains from taking these conversations a bit more seriously.
Yeah.
Ryan, we already have Visit Detroit, the Detroit Regional Chamber, and the Downtown Development Authority.
Yes.
So
and do they work together well? I'm not so sure.
Why do we need another organization to do this work? Or is it a question of looking more deeply at the organizations that are already on the ground and asking the question, what are y'all doing?
I think people are attempting to do this work. Rochelle Riley in Arts, Culture, and Entrepreneurship Office in City Hall is doing some of this work. But
we'll speak with her later.
I've got questions about who is actually working in that office and what kind of teeth do they really have to have things get done in this city in a substantial way. Writing this column for Hour about the city's lack of marketing itself culturally, it was like calling Visit Detroit and being curious about these numbers, and they were like, hey, you should talk to Downtown Detroit Partnership. And Downtown Detroit Partnership was like, oh, you should hit up Visit Detroit. And they don't have all these numbers in one place. I'm envisioning something where you can use data to be like, I know who went to the Motown Museum. I know who went to the DIA. I know what they spent. That stuff should be in one place so we can actually make decisions and see where we can kind of fill in the gaps that we're missing in this city. So, there's logistics that need to go into it. And it doesn't seem to be like people are working together in a cohesive way to move this freight ship of a city in any direction.
Sounds like you've got an interesting follow-up story to report on, right? You got some more questions. You got to go find the answers, Ryan. You're going to find the answers for us and bring them back to us. All right, we want to go to the phones again. I'm going to call Carolyn. Carolyn in Detroit. How would you like to see Detroit market itself? What's your slogan?
Detroit welcomes everyone. I think one of the problems here, and I agree with most of what all of you have said, but I believe one of the problems here is there are a lot of cliques here in Detroit, and people aren't invited in to do things the way they could be invited with open arms. A lot of clicks and clacks. You can't expect politicians to do a lot of this. We're going to have to do like the DJ said, roll up our sleeves, buy some storefronts, start some things on our own. You can look to an example on Chi-Town. They have over 300 theaters, the second city to New York. 300-plus theaters in one city because artists come together and they fundraise and get a storefront and open up things, or eventually get grants from like the Kresge Foundation or whatever's in Chicago, and they do it. They make it happen. Politicians are not going to make it happen. Also, we have to reverse this everybody against Detroit. That's some BS. That's the worst slogan you could have out. Even though people like it, it gives a negative connotation. So we need an opportunity for people here, and like the man said earlier, most of the arts that's going on are underground. You don't even hear of them. They're not even publicized other than Metro Times and a couple of online magazines. You don't even know what's going on. Now, the Gretchen, whatever her last name is, down at Hillberry with the jazz is cool and it's free. Then Vincent Chandler over at Wayne State is doing his second Sunday jazz at Wayne State, but unless someone tells you about it, you don't know what's going on.
Definitely have to be very tapped in, Carolyn, for sure, if you want to know what's going on in the art scene of Detroit. You got to be really tapped in to folks. Thank you for that call and for that feedback.
Or you need to listen to the Metro on WDET
right,
10 a.m. to noon to get tapped in. But this makes me think about, Carolyn, thank you for calling, Waajeed, what you're doing at the Underground Music Academy, because what Carolyn is talking about is the need for artists to be supporting each other and then to get that support from bigger organizations. But you didn't wait for the bigger organization to come in with Underground Music Academy. Can you talk about what you're doing with the Academy?
Sure. I started the Underground Music Academy in 2020 as a result of frustration. I've been traveling the world for the last 2 decades and lucky enough to be able to share Detroit music with folks of all types. And I just didn't see enough people that look like me, that had my experiences. And I'm a doughboy. I'm from Pershing High. I'm from the East Side. And I'm sharing music. And, I just don't see folks that look like me. And I decided to create a space that would create those people and give them those opportunities.
You just had a graduating class, right?
Sure did.
So what were talk a little bit more, though, about that class and how you sent all those folks back out into the world?
Yeah, it's beautiful.
All right, we're going to go to the phones again. We got Nolan in Farmington Hills. Nolan, what's your slogan for Detroit?
My slogan is blank canvas, dope frame.
Blank canvas, dope frame.
I lived there.
Okay.
Yeah, I lived there a long time, and it's got lots of hidden talent, like everyone's saying. And I think it's a city of opportunity. And it's just like this beautiful place to create. And yeah, if we can all come together and create there and work together, I think there's so much potential. And it's written into the stone. It's everywhere. No matter where you look, there's really beautiful art. There's really amazing talents just hidden everywhere.
Okay,
No
hitting
doubt.
on our potential.
Hitting on our potential there. Thank you for the call, Nolan.
I get a little nervous with the blank canvas.
You know what? I'm thinking about all the street art that's just like
The
covering.
blank canvas sounds as if there's nothing.
There was
but
nothing to begin with, and you
Yeah.
have to respect, the past to be able to create anything in the future. I do love the sentiment, but if you think about it a little deeper, it's a tricky narrative.
I mean, it's tough. You got to encapsulate a lot of different things into one slogan line, but we definitely commend the creativity with that one for sure.
That's right, Nolan. Thanks for letting us
Salute,
critique you on
Thanks
the
for calling,
spot
too.
there. Please don't be scared. Call us back.
I'm sure my slogan would not be anything of any good at all. So,
oh, come on.
You know what?
I'm not very good with slogans, I must say.
I have to say something. Waajeed's telling this story about opening a school in the city.
Underground Music Academy.
Underground
We'll
Music
say it
Academy. When we're talking about opening a school, the man's DJing around the world, taking that money, putting it back into this building, doing the carpentry and painting and doing all this work himself. The ribbon cutting for this thing, I remember walking in there and being like, how is the mayor not here right now?
I think you said that.
Endorsing what's happening here. It's this disconnect of like, great story, real work that's happening, graduating class. And it's are they paying attention? Are they supporting this thing?
Right.
And I'm not even saying with money, just the visibility of someone in that position of power to show up and say, this is important to my city. Those are the type of things, big and small, that we're not successfully doing when it comes to supporting our culture.
Tell me a statement that you'd each like to hear from the next mayor of Detroit when it comes to exactly what we're talking about and supporting arts and culture. What's a sentence you want to hear from them when they're getting inaugurated?
Keep it brief.
That's a big question. What do you think, Ryan?
I'd say, I want him here to say, Waajeed, you're in charge. Let's go.
Waajeed for mayor? Is that what you want to say? Okay.
We'll take that. We'll take that. Ryan Patrick Cooper, host of In the Groove on WDET from noon to 3 p.m., Monday through Friday. Waajeed, producer, DJ, host, musician, and the host of The Boulevard on WDET from 8 to 10 p.m. on Wednesdays and midnight to 2 a.m. on Sundays. Thank you both for sharing your thoughts and for joining us here on the Metro.
Thank you so much.
What a pleasure. Thank you.
Coming up, we'll continue discussing how Detroit should market itself. If you could make a new slogan for the city, what would it be? The number is 313-577-1019. This is the Metro on WDET, Detroit Public Radio. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Metro on WDET. I'm Robin Vincent.
And I'm Carrie Jr. II, in for Tia Graham.
Like other cities, the city of Detroit is many things. And because of that, it's known for a lot of different stuff. It's music, it's cars, and for many years, it's been crime. Those narratives are the way they are, those entrenched narratives, because of the people who shape them. And many people who've done the shaping don't even live in the city of Detroit. They don't even know Detroiters.
Yeah, but what if Detroiters were to shape the story of what that is? What kinds of things would they market? We want to hear from you in this conversation. We've already heard from a lot of you in this conversation. If you were to market the city the way you wanted, what would you make it? And what is your slogan for the city of Detroit? Would you make a slogan for the city of Detroit? Call in and tell us at 313-577-1019. Joining us now in this conversation is Imani Mixon. She's a journalist, screenwriter, and the founder of Mixon Media. She has written extensively about Detroit and Detroiters, including Aretha Franklin, Aaliyah, and the creators of techno. Imani Mixon, welcome to Detroit, the Metro.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so you've written a lot of stories about Detroit and Detroiters. How do you understand the city, and when you think of Detroit, what comes to mind?
I think of Detroit as my personal birthplace, so I feel like before we lift the arts and culture conversation to the collective, for a lot of people listening and myself included, Detroit is where I was born. So it will be home, and in addition to all the things that have happened since then and before then, it starts as a personal experience. So Detroit for me is my birthplace. It is, I feel like, probably the most frequent collaborator and source in a lot of stories that people have read from me in the past. And it is the place where I started my journalism career, and it's a really fruitful environment to do so.
Okay, Imani, I think we're getting a little echo on your end. We're going to go to the phones really quickly and try to bring you back in to hear you there. Okay, so I want to go and hear from Sarah in Toledo. Can we get Sarah in Toledo on the line? I want to hear what her slogan is for the city of Detroit and what she thinks would be marketable here.
Hi, my slogan for Detroit is Detroit, the capital of the Great Lakes.
Interesting.
Okay, I like that.
Sarah.
I feel like the Great Lakes are slept on, Sarah. I like that slogan.
Yeah,
it's very great.
We'll take your Toledo perspective on that. How about we go to Mac in Oxford? Mac, what's on your mind? Thanks for calling the Metro.
I'd like to see them repurpose like Fort Wayne, have a state park there where we can get more urban tourism. With the Gordie Howe Bridge there, you got the salt mines, you got the Ford factory tours, you got Greenfield Village, you got Mexican Town, you got Riverfront Belle Isle, all 15 minutes away from that area.
An embarrassment of riches, for sure.
I was going to say, keep going. This is great. We're going to have so many. I mean, we really appreciate you, Mac, for shouting out all of the great things that we have. I do want to ask you, though, do you have a slogan, one quick way to describe Detroit that you want, or no?
No, that didn't come across my mind yet.
Okay, no problem.
I'm digging the Motor City and Motown, and it's just an incubator, from the ground up. Greatness happens in Detroit.
We appreciate that, Max, so much for your call. Thank you for listening and calling in. Let's go to Annette in West Bloomfield. Annette, how you doing? We may have lost Annette.
All right. How about Mark in Detroit?
Thanks, you guys, for having me on. I'm going to offer you guys a little bit of a backstory before I arrive at what's not really a very well done slogan. But I moved back to Detroit about a month ago after being gone for about 60 years.
Welcome back.
It was about 25 years ago that I started coming here and then started bringing my family here and kept being drawn back to here. I was living out in the rural West, Wyoming. And about a year ago,
where in Wyoming?
Sheridan, Wyoming.
Okay. All right. I was living where the billionaires play in Jackson, Wyoming. Back to you, Mark. Oh, did we lose Mark?
We may have lost Mark.
Okay. All right.
We have Paul here in Hazel Park. Want to go to Paul?
Paul, thanks for calling the Metro.
Hello there. Listen, I would go with Detroit, last becoming first.
Okay. That plays upon our gritty spirit, last becoming first.
We are overcoming for sure. Thank you, Paul, for calling in and sharing that slogan with us. We appreciate it. I think we have Imani back on the line as well. Imani, are you there?
Yes, indeed. I'm here.
All right. Awesome. We got you back. Okay. You were talking about how Detroit is home, and that's how you understand it. The city's been known as Motown and the Motor City. What do you make of those brandings?
I think that they are extremely useful. I think that they're big shoes to fill. Being an arts and culture journalist and music journalist, it can feel like the story is already written for you. And I really am in a space, and I'm sure a lot of my fellow arts and culture people are too, where we want contemporary narratives. We want to talk about now. We don't always want to talk about then, and we want to be very specific about the needs that we need in 2025 as opposed to what was happening before or what worked before. I think it's time for us to figure out what works for us and be loud about it and find the support that we need to keep it going.
And can I ask a little bit of clarity on that? What do you believe is the contemporary narrative, or what are some of the inklings of ideas you have for that contemporary narrative?
For sure. So that's exactly how Mixed Media was founded. I'm extremely grateful for the time that I spent as a young journalist in Detroit learning how to write and connect with people and make resonant stories. And within that journey, I felt like there were things missing. As I mentioned, I'm grateful for every outlet I've been published in, every opportunity I've had. And I also know that I have the opportunity to do something different. So Mixed Media is founded on 3 pillars of creative ownership, creative continuity, and creative liberty. And I think that there's a lot of different factors involved. If you have a great idea and you don't know where to put it or you don't know how to fund it, it will remain an idea. And I think that Detroit owes itself to no longer just remain an idea, but to be a living, breathing, changing thing.
This sounds like you're echoing some of the sentiments we heard from Waajeed as well, about the fact that there are a lot of folks who are here who have ideas, who have creativity, but don't feel like they have the support they need to flourish. And so he took it upon himself, and you took it upon yourself to pursue those ideas. We've been talking a lot during this hour about a marketing slogan. Do you think the city should develop a marketing slogan? Do you think the city needs to market itself better to be a little bit more identified with communities outside of the Detroit itself or Michigan itself?
I have mixed thoughts on that. I feel like I absolutely owe the beginning of my career in Detroit to the marketing around local newsrooms and media. All of my first experiences in Detroit media were grant-funded contract opportunities, which were amazing, but they also didn't have a pathway, like what happens next year or how does this become a full-time thing. So it feels like there were a lot of stops and starts, and a lot of artists and creatives I know have had to make their own thing. And I think that the language around grit and overcoming is amazing for the Lions.
And I'm
for
right.
Sports teams. But
when you have a city whose sports team is doing well, it dominates the narrative. I'm sorry, I was in the middle of your thought. Go ahead and continue.
No, for sure. I think it's amazing, but it's not the most inviting thing to do when you're already starting from scratch and trying to make something new. So I'm less concerned about a slogan for Detroit, and I'm more concerned about the everyday needs being met of all residents in the city, whether we know them or not, whether they're published or not, or DJs or not. I think that there are real actual devastating and divisive things happening that are more important to the longevity of the city than what we create. So I would love a holistic vision where Detroiters, wherever they are with whatever they have, can have the resources they need to go further.
We're going to hear more about that holistic vision from Imani Mixon. Coming up, we'll continue to talk about how to best market the city of Detroit and the possible drawbacks of branding the city. And we want to hear from you. If you could make a slogan for Detroit, what would it be? The number is 313-577-1019. This is the Metro on WDET, Detroit Public Radio. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Metro on WDET, Detroit Public Radio. I'm Robin Vincent.
And I'm Kerry Jr. II. We've been talking about how you would frame or market the city of Detroit if you could. It's had a reputation for a long time, and we want to redefine it, create a new archetype or vision of what Detroit is.
We just want people to know what we truly are and to stop dogging us.
That's fair. Right now we're joined with Imani Mixon. She's a journalist, screenwriter, and founder of Mixon Media, an independent media agency. And just before the break, Imani, you were talking about some of the opportunities for people here in the city of Detroit and wanting to get beyond that. But I want to ask you, too, about the perception of Detroit from the outside. It's had a bad reputation for a long time. You've lived in the city and outside of the city. Can you just talk about why do you think people have looked upon Detroit the way they have?
Yeah. So I went to journalism school at Northwestern University the same year that we filed for bankruptcy.
Wow.
And you can imagine what it's like to go to a private suburban school and, sort of have that chip on your shoulder. And I think there is this fascination with Detroit, but also a lot of explanation needed when you say you're a Detroiter that literally does not happen when you're from other places. And I think that residents shoulder a lot of the responsibility for speaking for the city. So I'm happy that we're able to talk back to the powers that be, but I also think we need to be realistic about the powers that be and like what their goals are and realize that it has to be some actual structural changes in order for Detroit to be a fully realized place that not only attracts but also retains talent.
Amani, that had to be exhausting, talking to other students at Northwestern and instructors and feeling maybe like you had to defend the city. What were some of the things you were hearing from people at the time?
I think a lot of it was misinformation, which we were not using that word back then, but that's what it was.
Right.
And a lot of assumptions. And I feel like a lot of how you grow up in Detroit is different than maybe what other politicians or decision makers have experienced for the city. And I really would like that conversation to be handed over to someone else because it's very exhausting and it's a distraction from the work that needs to be done for individuals and collectives and families to do what they need to do within the city and beyond.
And the work that's being done, one could argue as well.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So we've also got Stephen McGee on the line. He's a Detroit cinematographer. He's working on a documentary film about the city called Resurgo. Stephen McGee, are you there? And can you join us real quick on the conversation? Let us know about your perception of what people think of the city of Detroit and what your actual experience covering and creating films about the city has been.
Well, first of all, the conversation is incredible, and what up to Waajeed. I'm kind of jealous I wasn't in the studio with him. Always a fun time. But yeah, I mean, look, for the past 20 years, a lot of us have been pushing the beautiful lenses of the city forward as best as we can. And it's only recently that people's outside of the city, their ears are open. I would also argue that the Lions are winning and helping some more positive stories come to light. But, through social media and through 2 to 3 minute films, a lot of us have been doing that. Like we have these beautiful stories. And yeah, I mean, the things that weren't here anymore, the abandoned buildings were leading the narrative, and that flipped, I think, around 2015. And for the past 9 years, I've personally noticed a lot more on the national level being influenced from the things that people are saying here locally. It's being reciprocated. Mm-hmm. But I think, the documentary that I'm putting together kind of just goes through those 20 years that I've been here as an outsider, as a Californian moving here for the Detroit Free Press, seeing, what we've seen in the past 20 years. But I've kind of floated around these different movements, in 2010, working for the New York Times, in 2015, helping the city win the City of Design Award for UNESCO, 2016, 2017, working with Dan Gilbert and his company. Just trying to work, these local narratives into the popular narrative, often with the collaboration of Jessica Care Moore and Big Sean and, different people who are out there, but I think lensing it as high as I can, like Hollywood, has been just an honor and also part of the success that I've seen.
Steve, we're going to go to the phones for a moment and then get right back to some of those changes, the contrasts that you've been seeing and what needs to happen to support folks here who are doing creative ventures. I want to hear from Camille in Detroit. Thanks for calling the Metro. Tell us, do you have a slogan for the city?
Yeah, so what I was saying earlier, because I got ahead of myself, I'm sorry, yapping. What I was saying earlier is that because Detroit and like thinking back to where it was and where we're at now, there's so much culture and history that is hard to conceptualize and put in a teeny box or like 5 to 10 words. And I think that's the issue because of all of the things that we are and what we have been, I think it's important to speak more to that as loudly and boldly as Detroiters are And
Yes.
I also think that when it comes to the marketing strategy of Detroit, like, who are we trying to reach?
That's
Like,
a
are we
good
trying
question, Camille. That is actually, I want to pose that question to you, Amani. Who do you think we should or need to reach when we're talking about the image of Detroit and what we want to communicate to other people outside of our city?
Oh gosh, I have no clue. I have no clue. I think that's above me, that question. But I do think the stories that we tell should be resonant, should be from person to person, and should be just true, authentic, spiritual stories. And I think that is what I built my career on in Detroit, what I will continue to do as I branch out into screenwriting and also making my own publication. And I think that it's actually a little scary to start the conversation about how things should be marketed when there's still work to be done to even be marketed.
You're listening to The Metro on WDET. I'm Robin Vincent alongside Carrie Jr. II. We're speaking with Amani Mixon. She's a journalist, screenwriter, and founder of Mixon Media, an independent media agency. And we're discussing the ways that Detroit markets itself now and whether that can improve. We've also got Stephen McGee on the line. He's a Detroit photographer and cinematographer and filmmaker. He's working on a documentary film about the city, and it's called Resurgo. Now, a lot of people, Amani, we know, leave the city for opportunity. What would you want to see happen to support the work that takes place here?
Yeah, for sure. I think that it is necessary to grow and expand and experience as much as the world as you can with Detroit in your heart, Detroit in your back pocket, Detroit as your homeland. And I think for both of us on the phone right now, that film incentive that we had way back would definitely be useful. Like the tax credit would be great for independent creators. I also think that I believe Ryan was talking about sort of building the arts and culture sector so that it can be competitive and people can actually not just be in the city and making art, but being able to afford to live in the city and make art and fund their own projects.
Yeah.
Through what they make as an artist in the city. And I don't know any city where that's necessarily true, even in the coast. So it would take a little bit more legwork to figure out what that means.
But arguably, if any city is going to do it, why not make it Detroit when we think about the amount of creative energy that is here and what would happen if people just had that support to actually work on their art? Stephen, what are your thoughts on this? What would you want to see happen to support the work that is taking place here when we talk about arts and culture?
Well, I think the next 2 to 5 years are extremely important. I mean, over the past 10 years, it could be argued that Hollywood has been decentralizing. I mean, they've been who we've been going to for creative inspiration and for major media. And Detroit has a massive bank of creative capital here. I mean, the people, especially the stories for Detroiters for the past 40 to 60 years, I mean, there's so much untapped, beautiful moments, kind of like Amani was talking about, that I think need to come at the highest level. I think those tax credits were beautiful. I mean, I saw Transformers or saw Batman, Superman, but they were using our ruins for Hollywood's sake. And now I think we kind of need that same equal effort in that kind of Netflix, era of how people ingest media. Like, we need this popular narrative that we all believe and live every day to have that same national recognition. And this is nothing new. I mean, the city's been trying to stick up for itself since the beginning.
Right.
But now I feel like people's ears are more open to that. And things like Kresge Arts in Detroit are fantastic. I mean, I wouldn't know Waajeed without them at the time in 2010, 2011. And now we just, I think, need that on a bigger level. I mean, we have some of the best billionaires giving some of the most amazing amounts of money to things. And I think if we could kind of tap into that and tap into the state, this region would succeed if Detroit succeeds like that.
To things. Yes. Yes, Stephen. I mean, it's a matter of asking we're saying what our priorities are, and they include the arts and culture. But it seems to be that there is a mismatch here in terms of the priorities of those who have a lot of the money.
Let's go to the phones. We want to hear some more. We've got a lot of callers still on the line. We want to get to some of you all before we wrap up here. Let's first go to Sean in Detroit. Sean, what is your slogan?
Yeah, hey, how you doing, guys? I like the soul engine of the Midwest since it combines the Motor City and some of the technology and all the arts with the music and the art that we put out from the city.
The soul engine of the Midwest.
That's not bad.
I'm here for that.
That's not bad. I like the soul, your spirit soul. You've got soul music.
I'm going to take it a little bit further. What about the soul engine of the nation?
Ooh, I like it. Soul engine of the world. Am I going too far?
No, you are not going too far.
Let's go to Elaine now. Elaine in Port Huron. What's your slogan?
My slogan is just the capital letter D, the equal symbol, and then the word respect. D equals respect.
And respect us.
RESPECT.
That's
the face
right.
you gave me. Yes, no.
It was a low-hanging fruit. I'll give that to you, Carrie.
It was. Thank you very much for that, Elaine. We like that. We like that very much. Now I want to go back briefly to Imani. Imani, what do you think? D equals respect?
You know, I love everybody's creative thinking. I appreciate all of them. I think we need to see them on the sheet and how people vote.
You want the tangible, you want the work on the ground. We completely understand and resonate
And
with
as
that.
a wordsmith, we can understand, Imani, why you want to be able to see those laid out. Okay. All right. Fair.
See how it looks on the page.
Yep.
All right.
Absolutely. The page is important.
Excellent. All right. Detroit journalist, screenwriter, and founder of Mixon Media, Imani Mixon. Thank you for joining us. Stephen McGee, Detroit cinematographer. Thank you as well. Everyone who called in and had their slogans, thank you all for calling in as well. Appreciate it.
That's the Metro for Thursday, January 16th. The show is produced by Sam Corey, Carrie Jr. II, and Jack Philbrandt. Our engineer is Nate Bender. Our senior producer is David Lyons. The Metro is a production of WDET, a listener-supported service of Wayne State University.
This is WDET FM, Detroit Public Radio, your connection to news, music, and conversation.
Thanks for listening.